Are we ready to go? Awesome. Hey, everyone. So today I'm going to do something that I said that I was never going to do again, which is this talk, Remote Workstations for the Discerning Artists. When the organizers asked, hey, can you do it again? Because everyone really wants to hear about it. I was like, okay, but I got to update it. Because now I've been working at Netflix for 4 years on this project, and things have changed. And I thought about it, and I thought, what is the 2024 edition? And that is, it's actually how we built this hard thing, and you can too. So it's not just about the technical breakdown, which is super interesting, but also I've added some tips and tricks on how to build something like this for yourself. Okay, so who are we building for? We're building for artists. We're building for the people who make the Netflix originals like One Piece, like Casa de Papel, the ones that you love, the hundreds of artists who need workstations and are working on VFX and animation. And that's the original concept for this. And what they need are workstations that are reliable and secure and ready to do all their work, and they need it where they are. A few years ago, we switched from office to remote. And I bet you're thinking, oh, of course, we all know COVID, right? Except we started this project in 2019. So either we're all a bunch of psychics or there was another reason. And the other reason is we have so much work. We wanted to be able to gather all the best artists in the world and meet them where they are and not worry about what country, city, location they're in, but what is the great work they can do on a Netflix original. Okay, so what else do artists need besides just the workstation? Well, artists are focused on art and not technology. I know that when an artist calls me, it is the worst part of their day. They don't want to hear that I need to install a driver or the wrong files appeared on their workstation. They just want to get to work, right? So that's the mindset for building this. And I'm going to go back one. One other thing they need is just to have it with them. So when you're building a project like this, before you get started, an important thing to think about is, do you need to do it, right? So that's part of the hard thing, is you're building something new. Why didn't anyone else build it before? Is it actually better, right? So we thought about this, and we thought about how people normally get workstations. They get it mailed to them. You might have gotten one mailed to you working remotely for a new company. But there's a couple different problems with it. And the two problems that we found that we can improve is security and flexibility. So let's talk about security. VFX and animation involves millions of files going from person to person to person, slowly improving an image until it's perfect for your small screen. And every time that file moves, there's a chance of a security leak because it's moved by FTP, by hard drive, by someone emailing it. It's all very leaky. So by keeping all the files in one place on a remote workstation in the cloud, you no longer had that problem. And it keeps our beautiful work from getting out there before it's done. So the other thing is flexibility. Movie productions are known for their jumping all around the place. They always want to try new things, right? New cameras, new lighting, new software. So we want to be there for them and make sure they have that. So in the past, you'd actually have to get a new computer under your desk at the office or have one shipped to you, and that takes a long time. But now, I can just bring one up. It can have a new GPU. It can have different storage. It can have a different operating system and different software very quickly without really interrupting your work. Okay, let's talk about the MVP. So one of the things that happens with hard problems is that you have a lot of ideas. You have a lot of theories on how things are going to work. But often, those theories are wrong. A quote that I really like is that when you're building a new product, you actually have the most impact and you have the least amount of information. Think about when you're deciding on things like database structure. You don't actually know how people are going to use this product. You think you know. So for me, I like to go as fast as possible. If you're going to be wrong, you might as well be fast and know that you're going to have to fix it anyway. And include that in your plans and know that this is not the final product. This is the product I want people to test on so I know how they're actually going to use it. Okay, when we were determining which technology we're going to use, that decision making was in our mind. What do the artists need? They need that stability. We need to move quickly, right? So on that build versus buy spectrum, unfortunately, we couldn't buy this. If we could, I wouldn't be here today, and we would have just purchased it. It would have been great. But instead, we thought about what would make our lives easier, and there's a couple different things when choosing. One is, let's see if we can bring it up. Okay, I'm just going to bring them all up so you can see them. Okay, so one is what we call the paved path at Netflix, is technology that a lot of people have already used. There's a lot of support for it, and we know how to use it. I'm going to start at the top with Java and Go. So we use Java as the back end because that's on our paved path. And Go for our agent because it is cross-operating system and works really well for that. And we knew we were going to have a variety of new and old operating systems. So we knew that agent had to run well wherever we put it. The next couple, there's SaltStack, Spinnaker, and Packer are all open source tools. We try to use that as much as possible because there's a huge community and we don't have to build that. We just get to use it, which is wonderful. And the one buy is Teradici at the bottom, which is our remote display provider, and I'll get more into that and how that works. And that's how the pixels get to the artist's screen. And then on the bottom, I know this is a Google event, but I'm sorry to tell you, I can't lie to you, my wonderful audience, that we use all AWS services. But that was because that was the paved path at Netflix. And we use a lot of their services. And there's a way of moving quickly. And now that we've moved quickly, we rethink a little bit, but this is a way of getting right into it. Okay, so I talked a little bit about artists, but who else are the workstations for? When we gave it out and people started using them, and after a couple of years, we did a run on checking all the personas, we realized there were actually 12 different distinct people using this one tool. Because it's not just the artist, it's everyone who helps the artist and builds on top of the platform. So everyone from artists to engineers to all sorts of different types of roles, right? So I'm not going to go over all 12, but I will kind of break it down into 3 distinct categories of people that we're building this for so you can understand the choices that we made. Okay, I talked about the artists, and I only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to just kind of speed run through this a little more. I'm going to go right to the pipeline engineers. Oh, and one note I wanted to mention is that you're going to start to see some VFX work on the screen, and all this VFX work was done on Netflix Workstations. So I was really proud to show some of the work that was done, right? So it's not just in theory. This is work that you can see on Netflix right now. And there's actually hundreds of movies and television right now on Netflix that was done on Netflix Workstations. Okay, let me talk about the pipeline engineers. So the pipeline engineers have to have both technical and artistic abilities because they're the ones helping the artists get to work. They're writing scripts and pipelines. They're handling all the configuration management, the storage, everything that gets an artist up and running, and they have to know the artist's job so they can debug when things go wrong. And when you have many different types of software, you're going to have problems where those connect. So they have a huge job, this group of people. And what they need from us, from my team, is the ability to see things that are going on, so observability, and then also a lot of different hooks so that they can build on top of it without coming to us. It's really important for me, anytime I build a project, to do the least amount of work as possible once it's in the wild. I want people to be able to be self-service and do all the work. Okay, so the final group of people is PI, which stands for Production Infrastructure Engineering, otherwise known as my team. And we have the best name because now in the future, when you think of pie, you're not going to just think, oh, delicious pastries. You're going to think, oh, delicious remote workstations. Now I got in your head. So I put this on here because you can't forget yourselves. Because once you build something, you have to maintain it, right? You're the one who's getting that page at 2 a.m. So stability is extremely important, not only to your users, but to you. It can't be that everything works on the front and then in the back end, none of your engineers have gotten any sleep in 3 days, right? So you want to think about yourselves as well. Okay, now I'm going to get into the technical components. The first one is fleet management, and that's how we manage individual workstations as well as the large pools of identical workstations for the artist. The second is configuration management, or how we design each workstation, especially for each artist. The third is user access, or RBAC, which is role-based action control. Access control. I don't know why I just forgot that. I've said it a million times. Thank you. Role-based access control to make sure that people are seeing the right configurations and the right workstations and the right control on the actual workstations. And then finally, those remote display providers to get that instance from the cloud to the home or the office where the artist is working. Okay, I'm going to start with fleet management. So for this, we have a bunch of Java services, our control plane, that use Spring Boot. Spring Boot is great because it kind of abstracts away a lot of Java components that you don't need to know, which is extra good for me because when I started this job, I did not know any Java. So let me build out this scenario for you again. You're solving a hard problem in a language you've never used before. So how do you start? Many of you have either done this or will be doing this. So I want to go into it a little bit, which is, so how I did it was I took the language I knew, which was Python, and then I would Google in Python this, in Java this, and try to get that translation. And that gets you a little bit of the way. And actually, that was 4 years ago, but now we have ChatGPT and Copilot that actually will get you that information even easier. But it doesn't tell you if that's actually the best answer. So you should really dig in a little more as technologists. And what I did is I read other people's code, and not just one way how to do it, but if it was a complex piece of software, I want to see how 3 different people do it. And not just how they do it in tutorials, but actually how they do it in life. So if you have the time, especially if at work you have a code base you can search through, that's one of my many blessings at Netflix is I can look through everyone else's code. So I enjoy seeing how they did it, and then either picking one or kind of merging what other people have. And that's how you slowly learn how to get the best work. And then just know that it's not going to be the best at first, but you'll keep going. But you can't just rely on the first answer that you see. You gotta dig a little deeper. So continuing on fleet management, I'm going to talk a little bit about Spinnaker. Spinnaker is an open source tool that helps you deploy and manage instances. And they have pipelines and clusters that we connect to through an API that says, give me this workstation with this GPU and the storage and the CPU, and that's what I want. And we also control the amount of workstations and whether we terminate any of them. We do that ourselves and don't let the autoscalers do it because we know how artists work, and they could just disappear for a long amount of time, and we could think, oh, they're done, let's just terminate it. But that's not always true, and we don't want to interrupt work. That's like our #1 priority, is getting artists to work. So we make sure to have customizations for all of that. Okay, so configuration management is my favorite topic because it's my specialty. And it's all about building disk images and then continuing through the process to build exactly what the artist needs. And I'm going to use this as a case study on how you can build a hard project and then slowly over time improve it. I like to call configuration management one of those glacier problems. It's a glacier because on top it looks really easy. You're like, oh, I'm just going to build a little Docker container with like a couple installations and then I'm done. And then you start to work on it and you're like 3 years in and you've created thousands of images of varying quality and you're like, oh, this is actually a lot harder than it looks. So that's why I both love and hate configuration management because it's hard, but also we all love hard because that gives us problems to solve. Okay, let's talk about how it works. So there's 3 stages: bake, run, and acquire. Bake is when you're baking, creating an image, like a Docker image or an AMI. Run is when the instance actually comes up, when you've subscribed to that instance and said, this is mine, with that image. And then finally, as acquire is when the artist says, hey, I want to take out that workstation. That's going to be my workstation to use. So initially when we started, we had the order of operations like this. We had the internal tools like the Go agent and all the tools needed to make it run, and the operating system and drivers and everything like that, and the bake, and then everything else in acquire. Our assumption was maximum flexibility. Artists want to decide what they want and then wait while it installs. But when has anyone ever wanted to wait while something installs? I just want you to think back to the last time that little button came up on your computer that said, time to install an update and like reboot your computer. It's going to take like 10 minutes. And you're like, I'm never going to do this. I'm going to leave that up there until my computer restarts on its own. And that's the mindset we should have had. We should have realized that no one's going to want to wait 45 minutes every time they want a workstation. The other problem is that at the beginning of a project, you're always iterating quickly. So in this case, it was multiple times a day fixing things. And those bakes take a long time. So it increased the developer cycle, which is not good for anyone. So we had two problems with this. So we changed it. Okay, you can see how I moved two items, right? So now, instead of baking the internal tools, they're at runtime. And then instead of software at acquire, it's also at runtime. So what that meant is that we created these pools of workstations that when they came up, they would install those 45 minutes of software and be ready to go. And then for the developers, that meant every time I needed a change, I just had to bring a new instance up, which was 5 minutes. So it was pretty quick, and that cut that developer lifecycle down. So it's great for everyone, right? Except for the one persona we always forget about, the accountants. They were not happy because we subscribed to all these workstations that were just sitting idle most of the time because no one's working on anything 24/7. And we didn't want people to wait, so we always had lots of buffer. It was inefficient, so also the engineers didn't really love it as a solution. So it's also a great point to think about in any project is that you're always going to be focused on getting things done rather than the costs, but eventually you got to think about how much things cost. So it's time to think about it. Okay, so what do we do next? So now what we do is we moved everything to the bake. So now we have this huge library of images to pick and choose from. And it doesn't really cost you that much money because you're not building the houses, you're just storing the blueprints, right? But remember from just like 2 slides ago how I said that bakes take a really long time, basically just as long as it takes to install the software? So instead of just abandoning bakes like we did, we just improved them, right? So we made the tooling a lot easier to customize bakes, to make them as fast as possible, to layer bakes so that you don't have to install everything every time. You can just change one piece of software. It takes a lot less time. And we also left the hooks in for runtime. So when a developer wants to change that Go agent, they test it at runtime. And then when they're ready, they put in the bake. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Any project is going to be a trade-off between features, cost, and maintainability, and technical maintainability. So that's something to think about every time you start a project and how you're constantly going to be moving stuff around to see how they work. And this might not be the final solution. I might come back with a 2025 edition, oh boy, and move stuff around. I think I just realized that it's not 2024 yet, and yet I put that on the slide, which is super funny, but also makes this presentation last way longer. So, but if you're watching this video in the future, you're welcome. It still seems very timely. Okay, let's talk about remote display protocol. So, as I mentioned before, this is how the pixels go from the instance to your screen. That handles all of that. One of the questions people ask me is that, how do you get started? I want to make my own remote workstation. It seems like you did a lot of work. Is there any way for me to try it out quickly? So that's where I mentioned Nice DCV. Nice DCV is actually installed on every EC2 instance in the AWS cloud. So if you want one, it's there for you to try. It opens in the browser. You can stream applications. It's a great way to get started. But we like flexibility, so we use both NiceDCV and Teradici as our remote display providers. And the other thing to note is that if you have lag, an artist doing fine work is going to notice. So it was important for us to be multi-regional and all over the world and as close to them as possible, so they never notice any issues. That's my dream. Okay, and then finally, the user access. I like to talk about this as part of the learning because this includes the UI. So what part of the UI do people have access to? Once we realized we had 12 personas, we realized we couldn't build the same pages for all 12, right? So if you try to build one page for 12 different people, it just looks weird, right? Because some fields are going to be grayed out, some fields are going to be all over the place, it's just not going to flow correctly. And we realized the better thing to do is actually make multiple pages and just hide them. It's better to have one page specifically for that one user that needs to quickly get their work done and just hide that page completely than to have different pages of a portion of it. I like talking about that because that's just another lesson we learned and something that's very different between like internal tools and say something that's like customer facing. I think it also really applies well to any like B2B tools, business to business tools that you're working on. Okay, so here is the full workflow. It starts with the baking, with all the software. Then the control plane says to Spinnaker, hey, bring up that instance, and it starts running. And the agent pops up and says, hey, your instance is healthy. Finally, the artist says, please, let me acquire that workstation. And now they have a workstation. And then the remote display provider sends it to the artist. Okay, great. I just want to make sure the GIF was running. So this is it in action. So it starts out with the user choosing it. And also it goes kind of fast, but it repeats, so you'll see all the parts of it. So the artists choose the configuration for what they need. They click on it. And then in a very reasonable amount of time, it changes over to click on your workstation. And then they just click, and a desktop pops up. And we even have configurations so that the software they need is already running and for them ready to go, because we knew there was stuff that they would want to have. So this is the full workstation in action. Okay, that was kind of a speed run, because I know I only had 30 minutes, usually a 60-minute presentation. But I hope you still found something really valuable in this presentation. And it gave you some confidence in building hard problems and how you can do it too, right? There's the easy problems that everyone wants to solve, but who wants to do that again? We want to solve the hard problems. So if you found something valuable in this, if you could take out your phone right now and scan this QR code and give me feedback, it'll take like just 2 minutes. I'd be really happy if you could do that. And I'll take just like a minute, I'll check my time. Oh, I'm doing so well, I have 5 minutes left. I'm gonna do one final thought after this. And then while you're doing the survey, you'll actually get a copy of the slides if you do the survey, so that it's just like my little gift to you and like an incentive to do the survey. And then as soon as you're done, if you just like put your phone down and look up. And if you don't have time to do now, you can do it later, but now I'll just get through it, and then you won't have to think about it. What's up? Someone just raised their hand and said, can they ask a question? I will actually be in the expert zone after lunch because I've actually done 3 talks now, and I would love to answer anyone's questions about any of those talks, but I also don't want to keep you from lunch, which will be in like 5 minutes. So I don't think I'll have any time for questions, but I will be available at the rest of the conference if you want to ask questions. I'm also available on LinkedIn if you want to like follow up and talk about it. Okay, I see most people are done, and I want to make sure there's time for my final thought. Okay, I've now been working on Netflix Workstations for 4 years, and I was thinking to myself, what have I learned in that time? And one of the things I learned is that you should be kind to yourself when you're working on hard problems. You solved the problem in the best way you could with the information you had at the time. And now that you look back and you're like, oh, I hate all of this. I have to redo all of this. It's okay. You'll redo it. Everyone redoes everything if they have time. But you made it work, and that's the most important thing. And you know what you could do? You blame it on someone who left, because they're not there. They won't know. I know you all do that anyway, because that's what everyone does, so just do that. That's fun. And the other thing to note that I always say to myself when I'm tackled with something like, I've started a new job, I don't know the language, I don't even know how to get started on this. What do? I remember that I've solved hard problems before, and I will solve this one. It's basically my everyday, is remembering that fact. I know everyone here, as lifelong learners and technologists, love solving hard problems. And I want to kind of boost your confidence and say, you will do it. You will solve it. You'll make cool things like this. You may already have. You'll make more in the future, because we're going to keep making cool new things. And I'm really excited to see them. So what I want you to do is connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram and follow up with me 3 months, 6 months, 5 years from now, and tell me, hey, Michelle, remember that thing you said? I did this because of it. And it either worked out great or really badly. Then you can blame me. I don't work with you. That's fine. You can blame me for things. But I really want to hear what cool things you've done in the future, because you heard something you heard me talk about today. So that's what I'd love to hear, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to me before lunch, and have a great lunch, and thank you so much to the organizers for having me, and I can't believe I got that 60-minute presentation done in 30 minutes. Thank you so much. Do I have another slide? Oh, yeah.